The first 5 minutes of a tragic movie or book can tell you everything. Mostly. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Stories Between Us, where we analyze the psychology of the tragic movies and books we're going to be watching and reading. Today, however, we're not going to be analyzing anything. We're going to be looking out for details that you can maybe look at our next read through or watch through. Most of the time, there are only 3 types of openings. There is the monologue, there is the tragedy or the silence, and then there is the meet cute. Regardless on which one the movie or book starts with, we will see that it leads us into the depth of the story instead of ruining the flow. First, we have the monologues. The first thing I want to say about this is that they tell you who the character is. They show us kind of the archetype, the personality, their beliefs, their worries, their discouragement, hobbies. It just tells us about one of the main characters. And usually it will only be one because it is either based on a book, which is in their point of view, or it's the person who has an illness. With keeping this in mind, I also want to bring up that most tragic books that we are going to be reading is in the first person, which I find really interesting because we don't see the other character's point of view. We just see Hazel's point of view. We see Evie's, and we don't really see firsthand what the other character is feeling throughout, at least book-wise. But in the movie, we kind of see a little bit more of both sides, depending on how they choose to film it. So these opening monologues from the main character can consist of many things. It can explain history, whether it's medical or what happened before they got diagnosed. It can happen before the tragedy. It just kind of explains the past or the present. These monologues also lay the foundation for the tone of the story and the voice of the main character themselves, because we see the way they talk about things. Hazel Grace, for example, we see that she tells us straight up that this isn't going to be one of those happy love stories that we see in rom-coms and stuff. She was really real about that. And that kind of shows us who she is. She's a realist in the archetype. And by explaining the history and the tone, it prevents the story from slowing down later and making us have to explain, or making them, have to explain what their medical history is and what it was like before. Instead, they can only show us later instead of telling us. Many different movies and books show this. We saw it in Instructions for Dancing. We see this in Fault in Our Stars, 5 Feet Apart, Midnight Sun, etc., etc. From what I've noticed, a lot of the monologue stories, they stay from present time and then they go to the future. They don't jump around in timelines. Which leads me to the next different opening that we can see, which is the silence or the tragedy. I put these together for a reason, because the silence would be almost immediately after the tragedy happens. It can be the funeral, it could be them finally home by themselves, it can be them not at home but just by themselves in general. It can be anything that happens after the tragedy itself, them in a hospital even. As for the tragedy, this is the actual event of the tragedy. This can also be in a hospital room, this can be a car crash, this can be basically anything where someone either gets highly injured or they unfortunately pass away. Basically the core of the story, but it happens at the beginning. And these also set the tone for the story, but in a different way than the monologue does. This sets the tone of, this is what has happened, so let's show you what happened before. And that's why the timeline kind of jumps around. And as opposed to the monologue where you wonder, will this happen or when will this happen? You ask, how did it end like this? Because you don't see any context beforehand. You just see what happened. You don't see their story yet. You don't learn about the characters, and that kind of hooks you in even more because now you want to know the characters and why you should care about them and why you should care that this happened to them specifically. It also makes all the coming moments more bittersweet afterwards, and it eliminates the plot suspense of what's going to happen to them and is it what we think it's going to be. Most of the time, this will be in movies, but it does happen. It's not right away in all this time, but it happens at least 3 chapters into the book where the tragedy occurs. And then it happens in We Live in Time, which is the silence part of this opening. And we see it in the in-between, which we recently watched, where it begins with the car crash before we even get to know the characters. The next opening that we might see in these is the meet cute. And yes, you heard me, the meet cute. So as opposed to the monologue where you only meet one character, or the silence and tragedy where you don't know any of the characters yet, the meet cute, you get to see both of the characters. You see how they meet, and it shows you with how it began. It doesn't show you how it will be. It doesn't show you how it was. It shows you in this very moment how they met, and it kind of sets a dynamic for both of the characters. Like in All the Bright Places, which we will watch eventually, we see he saves her. That's all I'm going to say for now. And it sets the dynamic of they didn't know each other yet, but he wanted to save her because he, in a way, knew what he needed to do because he knows, in a way, what that is also like. And seeing how happy they are, or seeing how they help each other in the meet cute, or how they see each other at the beginning, it really shows a good foundation for their relationship going forward. And we may even see foreshadowing, like for, I think it was Chemical Hearts, we see him trying to fix glass using this technique, and then she walks in, and it gives you the sense of, you see him fixing this, so it gives you the idea that he feels like later that he needs to fix her, which of course isn't true, but it's a little bit of foreshadowing on that front. Overall, the monologue warms your brain. The abrupt tragedy breaks your heart immediately, and the deceptive meet cute tricks you into hope before they pull the rug right under you. And if you were to rewatch these, you may see foreshadowing in any of these different openings. Like for the in-between, we see the car crash and the light flickering above them, which happens a lot throughout the story as well. That is a big piece of foreshadowing. At the beginning of Midnight Sun, we see Katie looking out her window at the sun, or at Charlie, in admiration. And then that would be foreshadowing for how the story ends, with her actually being out in the sun with Charlie, who she had watched from her window all this time. So the next time we watch or read a tragic romance and the main character starts with a voiceover, or the screen cuts to flashing sirens immediately, we should pay attention, because the director isn't just setting the scene, they're actually telling us exactly how it's going to end. And they're daring us to fall in love and get to know these characters anyways, even though we already know how the story is going to end, and we know that it's going to hurt. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you guys next weekend, and until then, stay curious. Bye!